Welcome back, everybody. New day on the Playbreakers pod. I'm Gatto. We got Tom. We got Q here. How you fellas doing?
I think you call yourself Gatto, but you look like Rob Lowe right now. So I don't know.
Just that face of no happiness, no
Go
sadness,
NFL.
just kind of there.
Go Endor sports team.
I really
Yeah.
want to clip a picture of you and just do like a side by side with that picture. I got it.
Guys, I got this hat half off when I bought another generic NFL hat. So
Probably threw in a bowl of
had to
soup
take
with
the
it
deal.
too.
Yeah, they just couldn't get rid of these.
What was going through your head when you're like, yeah, NFL hat?
I said,
I don't care
someday
about the teams.
I'm
I
gonna
care
have
about the
some rough hat
business.
hair going on. All right. And I figured, especially if we're talking about like generic teams, I don't want to like if we're talking about Cowboys, I don't want people to like tune in and then look at me and go, he's a Giants fan. I can't take any of his takes serious.
I
Which
honestly think a
fair.
lot of times because it's a team I hate, I can talk more objectively about the Cowboys than any other team.
Yeah,
It's a hot
I
take.
don't know about that. I think you're conflating your feelings for analyzing a team that you hate
I hate
with
them, but that
with
also
not having a
causes
slant
me.
in the feelings that you have towards them.
No, because I hate them so much, it causes me to actually look at them realistically and be like, where are their strong points and where are their weaknesses? I'm always very honest about it, the teams I don't like.
Well, you're just trying to find the weakness in their armor, then, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
He's trying very hard. Well, folks, thanks for joining us this week. Sorry we were a bit delayed, but we are bringing to you just a high-level conversation about the NFL draft. Obviously, the NFL Combine is coming up in the next couple of days, and we wanted to just run through a couple of the positions that have a lot of depth, but also a lot of intrigue to them as well. And before we get into that, if you all could do us a favor and give us a like and subscribe on your favorite streaming platform, we'd much appreciate that as well. You can follow these shows live on Twitch as well as YouTube. It's a cool opportunity to be able to interact with us in real time and also ask us some questions about what our opinions are or even provide your own. So excited to get us started. Q, I know that you had a couple of positions that you wanted to dive into. Let's start with your thoughts. What did you want to talk about? What positions are exciting you?
So far, this looks to be the best wide receiver class I've seen maybe in the last 10 years, honestly. Like it's so deep and there's so many different types of guys. Like if you need a slot, if you need an X, you need a Z. There's so many different types, but quarterback also another one. Like we talked about this a little bit, but it seems very top heavy.
Mhm.
But there are actually like some quality guys that are going to be going probably a little bit later than they probably should. It's just because of the excess amount of guys, but also I think offensive linemen. This is the year if you need an especially an offensive tackle. If you need a tackle, this is the year to do it because there are like at least 3 or 4 guys that are going to go in round one, and then there's probably another 5 or 6 that are. I think you're going to see like day 2 be like huge for tackles this year. There's going to be a run eventually, and it's going to go fast. But there's a lot of guys that like I think are day 1 starters. So very interesting.
Yeah, I think as a Commanders fan, that is good to hear from my side. And I'm hoping that that's because there's an abundance of guys, it's an area that my team and hopefully the other teams that I'm paying close attention to will emphasize during the draft and not hope that they can score somebody in free agency. Anyone in particular that's sticking out to you?
So for quarterback, this is going to be a little bit of a controversial take, but it wouldn't shock me if Spencer Rattler ends up becoming not the best quarterback in this class, but one of the best quarterbacks in this class. I think the conversation has shifted so much to Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels that we don't even talk about Spencer Rattler. And I understand why, because he wasn't super successful at Oklahoma, transfers to South Carolina. South Carolina is not really like, a big time program at this point. But he did put up decent numbers, but I think it's not really about the numbers that I'm looking at. It's if you watch enough tape of him, he makes enough wow throws. You're talking about a guy that you're not going to get on day one. You're probably not going to get on day two. You're probably going to get in the back end of round four, right? Like early day three type of guy. We talk about Jalen Hurts, right? I know there's some people who don't like particularly believe in Jalen Hurts. They think he's a system quarterback. Guy played in the Super Bowl, played one of the best performances in the Super Bowl of the last few years. So I think whatever your opinion on him is, he certainly outplayed his second round status, right? It wouldn't shock me if Spencer Rattler ends up becoming the next Jalen Hurts, right? Guy who comes in late draft status and then all of a sudden is a starter for a team, like for the Giants, right? You get him on day 3. Wouldn't shock me if he takes Daniel Jones' job. I think context is really important. That Oklahoma team was not very good, right? They hadn't lost a game. And he got benched for Caleb Williams, which, is going to happen. And then he transfers. So, but I think the biggest knock on him has been apparently like he has a bit of like an ego. That's at least what I've heard. So I think that's what has kind of knocked him down. But if these last few years have kind of changed his perspective, could be a real steal.
Yeah, I was very critical of Spencer Rattler while he was at both Oklahoma and South Carolina, just for the reasons that you had mentioned. Didn't seem like to be a big team guy. I also want to preface too that he was a part of that QB1 show on Netflix, and I think that very much colors our impressions of guys. Seemed very much like it was about him, which, I mean, given the context of a show like that, yeah. But his numbers were not terrible at Oklahoma, and considering the resources that were at South Carolina, he actually played pretty well. And I like guys that play decently on teams with not a lot of talent. I watched him live during that University of Florida game, and he looked pretty good.
MVP of the Senior Bowl, too.
Yeah, MVP of the Senior Bowl, a guy who was highly recruited coming out of high school.
Unanimous QB1 in 2019, by the way. And I mean, again, I think because of the fact that Lincoln Riley had produced so many number one picks. He had Baker Mayfield in 2018, number one pick. He had Kyler Murray back-to-back years, 2019 as the top quarterback. And then you look at his numbers in 2020, and you're like, he's really good. And then all of a sudden, 2021, he goes 5-0. But they were really coming close to losing to like not great teams, and he wasn't performing at a high level. And then Caleb Williams comes in, and Caleb Williams, he was just destroying people. So he lost his job despite being undefeated at Oklahoma. So
yeah,
I think the context there is kind of Jalen Hurts-ish, with Tua Tagovailoa. So him transferring to South Carolina, the numbers weren't good, but like he did make Xavier Legette, who is one of my favorite receivers in this draft. He did do a lot of good work with him. So it just seems to me that I think people are overthinking it a little bit with him.
Yeah. Go ahead,
I just want to know, my question is, it feels like he's become a big buzz as of late, but he wasn't in this discussion until recently. What's the cause of that? What's behind that? What drove that? Was it just because his Senior Bowl highlighted his performance abilities?
Yeah, and I would also say too, like this is what happens when you have 3 guys that are going to go in the top 10. Everybody needs to find others that could potentially fill those other spots. I mean, we had a conversation about could that be JJ McCarthy, and there's a lot of people out there that believe that he is a talent that should be going high in the draft. But this doesn't shock me that we're starting to see buzz around other quarterbacks now, because the top 3 are pretty locked in at this point. Like they're all going to go in the top 10. There's no question about it, unless something catastrophic happens. So
is it also because? Oh yeah, sorry, Tom.
Well, I think we're trying to find a storyline for. I think we're trying to find somebody who could really help a team that people have kind of forgotten about. And I wonder too if it's really because like, oh man, you went from Oklahoma to South Carolina. you're not in a highly competitive environment in South Carolina, but you are in frankly a more competitive conference.
Yeah,
You're
moving to
playing
the SEC.
you're playing NFL
Mhm.
talent every weekend.
Yeah.
And
I think also is for like teams like I'm a Giants fan, right? And like sixth pick doesn't really provide you many options, right? Because unless they trade up, and you need a partner to do that, I have to shift my focus and be like, well, who could be somebody that we take later on, low risk, high reward types, you know?
mhm.
I think a part of this is exactly that. Is that I think there's 10 or 12 teams right now that are really in the business of finding a
Yeah.
potential QB1, right? And that's a huge reason why the boards are, or experts are diving deep and really scrutinizing this position, especially since I don't know what next year's draft looks like in terms of
Not
quarterback
good.
talent. And
Not as
that's,
good.
I think, the growing consensus is that there's only
Quinn
one or two. And
Quinn Ewers is like the top QB right now.
Shador
And
Sanders is there too, but after
they would
after
be
those
QB
two,
5 or 6 this year,
yeah,
easily.
and those names don't strike me right now. I think I need to go back and look a little bit, but they don't strike me as guys who you plan to have starting your on your starting lineup for the 2025 season.
I don't think
25, 26.
anybody is as good as Caleb Williams. And like again, we're talking about Caleb Williams on the scale of Andrew Luck, right? A guy that you essentially tank your season for, right? And I don't know if he's not Patrick Mahomes to me. I think people are going a little too wild, but he certainly has more ability than most guys coming out. So it's just
It's like
natural with
play
him.
style. It's play style comparison, I think, is the big draw, right? And
Yes,
he's someone who resembles Mahomes the most. Doesn't mean he is Mahomes or can be Mahomes, but that he's resembling him the most at the moment.
for sure. Yeah, and I think he's got that type of ability, and I think he can be that type of guy. But I think putting Mahomes' expectations on Caleb Williams coming out is insane. I just think that he's got great playmaking ability, and for a team, I think I think a better comparison is he could have like a CJ Stroud effect to a team, right? Like no one expected the Texans to be this good this early,
Mhm.
but because of how creative and smart CJ Stroud is in the pocket, that's the type of effect he could have.
The one thing I will say about Williams, and I think he's probably the most complete guy when it comes to everything. Every quarterback has their flaws, but I think his are the most correctable. I mean, you look at when he was at USC, like particularly this year, team was not very good. They lost games they should have won, and it was really because of the defense. So a lot of the interceptions that he had thrown or the mistakes that he made were really just like justifiably trying to play hero ball because that defense was so unreliable. His decision making was a little faster than it probably what it should have been, but I think that's what happens when your offensive line is like a New York City turnstile. The one thing that I've been thinking about, though, and I'm not saying this is a huge knock on Williams, but those Lincoln Riley quarterbacks have needed a little bit of time to acclimate to pro style offenses. Baker struggled a little bit. Kyler Murray was able to get away with it a little bit, just given he was more mobile than the two of them. Does that bother you at all? Does that make you a little nervous?
No. And I said it before that I think Jaden Daniels is probably going to have a better rookie season than Caleb Williams will. Like, regardless of wherever they go, it's just because Daniels is a 5-year starter. You know, he's been in college for so long. He's seen so many starts. Like, again, if you ever look at like Bill Parcells, he had that list of like what makes a franchise quarterback. And it's like, you have to be at least like a 4-year starter. You have to have a 2-to-1 win-loss record. You have to have a 2-to-1 touchdown interception ratio. Like Daniels is like that guy. But
he's
so
a 3-year starter, though. He's not a 5-year starter.
Arizona State.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were talking about Williams.
No, I'm talking about Jaden Daniels.
Okay.
He fits that. But I think the upside is there, but like I think with Williams, it's just the pocket manipulation. You know, Daniels, the one big knock on Jaden Daniels and compared to Caleb Williams is that like he feels like he tucks and runs a little bit and he takes big hits. You ever seen like he takes cartoon cartoon Bugs Bunny type hits, man.
Like flat and like impressed
Roadrunner,
and they have
yeah,
to pull him
Wile
out
E.
of the ground.
Coyote shit. And I'm like, this guy is like reckless sometimes, to where Caleb Williams is like a fucking magician in the pocket. The biggest knock on Caleb Williams is turnovers, but I don't really care about that, honestly. Like, to me, like, everybody was talking about Mahomes' interceptions a couple years ago. I don't care, man. Brett Favre threw a lot of interceptions too. Like, you're gonna have more wow throws and you're gonna have turnovers, so I don't really care. But for me, I said that Caleb Williams is gonna take probably a year or two before he hits that like peak. But for me, I'd rather have Caleb Williams than most quarterbacks. So at this point, so for me, I'm not really too concerned about the first few years, because I think the ceiling is just way too high for him to be a bust, right? Like, he may not be a top 5 quarterback, right? But I don't think he's going to be a bust.
Yeah, I mean the turnovers thing,
Fumbles mostly.
I mean, what quarterback doesn't do that though? And a lot of like, I feel like that is always overemphasized when it comes to guys that are not responsible for running the football all of the time. Like, oh, he fumbles a lot. I'm like, yeah, quarterbacks fucking do that, because when you're standing still and somebody who's 300 pounds hits you, the likelihood of the ball coming out is not as unrealistic as you think. So the way to solve that problem is protect this guy. Gatto, you got something?
I mean, the fumbles, depending on the situation, can be indicative of an ability, though. The idea, if it's the type of fumble in which a defender is outside of the quarterback's peripherals, or he's lacking presence in the pocket, you will run into the situation where there's an increased amount of fumbles due to that, right? So if they're not aware, they don't have the awareness to tell that there's a defender pressuring them from behind or from their blind side or something, they can get the swipe on and get that fumble, right? So that is something that, depending on when you're looking at the film, if that's a concern, it will bring up, their pocket presence and their awareness, I think.
Yeah. But I mean, I think all of these guys have that same issue, though.
They're developing.
And I think, yeah, I think that him, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, they all have areas of improvement within their game. And the number one thing is always going to be footwork, because footwork is like, can solve a lot of problems when it comes to accuracy and being on balance. And then like taking hits, like that's the only one that really concerns me is going to be Jaden Daniels. Like, dude, you got to learn to slide, man. Cause we've seen this movie already with RG3, and it does not end well.
He's drawing a lot of Lamar Jackson comparisons, and I don't think it's
Lamar slides, man. He gets out of bounds.
And yeah, I was gonna say, I don't think it's completely crazy, because there are a lot of similar elements to their game, but to where he takes a lot of hits, Lamar is just so fucking smooth and like knows how to avoid those big hits, and understands that they're similar builds too, like not like kind of scrawny, not really too muscular. So like he's gonna have to learn how to avoid those type of hits.
I don't necessarily like the comparisons at all, though, because I don't sense, like, with Jaden Daniels, like that same, like, there are moments watching Lamar Jackson where it seems like he's in fast forward and everyone else is going in slow motion. And I don't see like that with Jaden Daniels. I don't like, again, I think he's a great athlete. He's definitely someone who's got the wheels and can run and make plays that way with his legs. But I'm with you kind of on this one, Tom. I think the undersized thing is a big concern. He has had some setbacks with injuries. It's, I think something that the team that employs him on their offense, they need to scheme appropriately for the worry of that risk injury with the potential with his play style,
Yeah.
Going.
Go ahead.
Sorry, going. Tom, yeah, go for it.
No, it's all you, buddy.
Okay. So going back though to Rattler though, he's another person whose size really, I think, concerns a lot of people, right? Because he's 6 foot 219, but he has a limited like hand span. He's got small hands. He's got
Yeah.
Kenny Pickett sized hands.
Man, are we doing the
So
hand thing again? Like,
his
Joe
arm
Burrow,
length is short too, obviously because of height. But
Joe Burrow had smaller hands. I'm not as concerned with hand size. I mean, I get it. Like Jared Goff too. Like if they're
but
if they're below
look at the
the
concern with
9,
Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow's hand literally ended his season this year.
his wrist did, not his hand.
Was it his
Also,
wrist,
I
though?
wanna
But
point
I thought it
out-
was part of his. He couldn't grip
Attached
the
to his
ball.
hand, yes.
I also want to point
Well-
out also though is that when it comes to hand size, we really do have to wait for the combine for all that. Like everything is just it's speculation until we get the official number. I'm not really too concerned with that because I mean Rattler has like a crazy arm for a guy his size. Very Kyler Murray-ish. And
He's got
again,
good velocity.
that's the difference. But like I want to talk about Drake May for a minute because Pro Football Focus put out a stat. He had 79 big time throws in his last 2 years at North Carolina. Since the 2020 class, no first round quarterback has had more than 59. So you're talking about a guy who leads the league, leads college football in explosive throws. He has low turnover worthy throws. Yet I'm hearing more and more of like potential falling in the draft for him. And I'm not sure I really understand it because 6'4", 220, good movement skills. It's not like a burner or anything. Big arm, smart kid. I know ACC, I know limited starts, I get it. But like I think people are overthinking Drake May a little bit.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think he's a guy who suffers from, in the similar way that Caleb Williams is, both of them by their careers had down 2023s versus Jaden Daniels. His performance improved from 22 to 23. But that team at UNC was also not that great. And they played a lot of games kind of all over the place. His offensive line wasn't that great too. I think he was somebody who made a lot of really impressive plays, and I think he's got a lot of upside. He's really young. He's a 2-year starter at Chapel Hill. I don't understand the concern. I think it's more so he might be falling just as a victim of circumstance because New England said that they want to find a veteran starter. And then you get into Arizona, already have a quarterback. Chargers have a quarterback. Giants, maybe. But, I mean,
Well, if he gets past 3, that's where it gets interesting, right? Because I think we all pretty much are in agreement that Arizona is not looking for a quarterback, right? Chargers, definitely not looking for a quarterback. Giants, I don't think he gets past 6, honestly. I just don't see it especially because I think out of all the quarterbacks, Drake May fits what the Giants want to do the most. Like, I know the Josh Allen comparisons are kind of lazy, but it's
they're not bad though. They're not bad considering.
It's definitely there. Like, I definitely understand why people say that.
But one of the other things that I've heard a bit now is that he's gone from the Josh Allen and Justin Herbert comparisons to like Trey Lance comparisons.
I think
I don't
had a
know.
bit
I
of a
don't know.
slow register.
No way.
I know but like it feels like it's a weird narrative. I don't know if it's because they're trying to set us up for letdown or so they can have some controversy here.
I don't trust anything I hear during draft season because this is probably from some team who wants him to fall. And that's what it is. I don't believe it for one.
It's just talking heads, right?
Yeah.
Here's the thing that
24/7 sports stuff.
Here's the thing I want people to keep in mind that in 2022 he had 517 attempts, and in 2023 he had 425. That's over 900 attempts in college. That's a a pretty good number. And that 22 year, 4,300 yards, 38 touchdowns, almost 700 yards rushing, and 7 touchdowns. 23 was a down year, but that whole team, I think, regressed significantly.
And again, I don't think he was that. The stuff that I've watched so far, it's not that bad. Like I think some people are over. I think this is the time of year when people start overthinking things, and like, you know, a lot of people were so confident about Drake May, and then all of a sudden now it's like it's nothing but questioning its abilities, and I don't really understand it. I would have thought Jaden Daniels being the Heisman would have gotten more questions than he seems like Jaden Daniels, because it seems like now the wind is kind of shifted, and Drake May was locked in number 2, and it seems like Daniels might be the number 2 guy.
Yeah,
to a lot of people. So it's very interesting.
I think a lot of it just comes down to what have you done for me lately, and people are looking at that rather than this is the body of work. Because I mean, Jaden Daniels is significantly older than the other 2 guys. He's got more mileage on him.
Yeah,
bigger question marks that we just talked about with like taking big hits. Those will eventually catch up to you in the NFL. And Drake May, I mean, he's 21 years old, and he's going to be 21 when the season starts.
Yeah.
So
Caleb Williams too.
So, I mean, if we're having that same conversation, and I don't mean to bring up JJ McCarthy again, like if we're having the same conversation about his youth and how young he is and how developmental he can be, like
of the guys,
Drake May was a highly recruited guy too.
Of the guys going into this draft, I feel like May is someone who has the potential to evolve probably more than the other quarterbacks.
It wouldn't shock me if Drake,
being drafted at this point.
If you look at this draft 3 years later, it wouldn't shock me if Drake May is the best quarterback of this group.
Yeah.
Because I just think that his floor, to me, like his floor is just so high to me, to where I understand why people are concerned about Caleb Williams. Jaden Daniels concerns me a decent amount, but like I just don't see how Drake May is not at least an average starter in this league. I just don't see it.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Gatto. I'm sorry. Didn't mean to cut you off.
No. Go for it, sir.
Well, I wanted to shift to wide receivers because I know, Q, you said this could be the most talented group. Outside of like I don't know if we necessarily need to get into Marvin Harrison Jr. or Malik Neighbors. I think those are probably 2 locks to go in the top 10. Who else are you looking at as a potential like real steal here?
I mean, you also Robin Dunze is also probably a lock for the top 10 at this point too. So you're talking about 3 guys that could go really early. And it's funny about Neighbors is like, I think Neighbors is on the level of Jamar Chase. So like you're talking about a guy that if he wasn't in a draft with, I think that's like I heard somebody say this the other day, and I thought it was really funny that the biggest knock on Malik Neighbors is that he was in the same draft as Marvin Harrison Jr.
Yeah. Like
that's his biggest weakness, is that like if it was any other okay, I don't know what that was. If it was any other draft, he would have been wide receiver 1 by like a significant margin.
Yeah.
But like there's so many guys. Like I mentioned Xavier Legette before, South Carolina. Steve Smith, who is like my guy I go to for wide receivers, because like, you know, he predicted Cooper Kupp the last few years. He had Cooper Kupp as wide receiver 1. Everybody made fun of him. Last year he was shitting on Quentin Johnston. And again, like the way he explains it is just really, really like he does these really in-depth analysis, and like body catching wide receivers like irk me. You know, when I see a guy, especially with 34-inch arms, and you're body catching 90% of the time, it's a red flag. But he talked about Xavier Legette, and I swear to God, I'm watching this guy's tape, and I'm like, there's something DK Metcalf-ish to his style of play. And he literally said, Steve Smith said the other day that he's a bigger, DK Metcalf, and I was like,
which is scary.
which is scary. And he is like, again, catching balls from like there are times where I saw Xavier again. He might be more dangerous too because of the fact that I saw this guy at 6'3" take a crossing route all the way to the house, and he's also got punt return and kick return abilities too. He is a nasty receiver. And I think he's not going to be a guy that goes in round 1. Like, he's probably going to be a round 2, round 3 guy. I think people are going to, again, it's going to be DK Metcalf all over again. People are going to overthink it. I think he's going to put up big numbers at the combine. The biggest knock on Leggett is that he spent about 5 years at South Carolina and was kind of a one-year wonder. He only really put up numbers this past year. I'm not really that concerned about that, and I think that's why it's going to knock him down, but the raw fucking tools, man, are just so apparent that, you know, like for me, it makes too much sense. But I have a draft crush every year, a guy that like I will, like if I was in a room with a GM, I'd be like smashing things I'd be punching the table, like, you have to take this guy. And it's Malachi Corley. He's a wide receiver from Western Kentucky. Back-to-back years, 11 touchdowns. And listen, Western Kentucky, not playing big-time talent, right? But, like, when you watch a guy who plays at a smaller school just absolutely ragdolling people, it tells you that he is capable of playing at the next level. And I hate doing this because I've heard so many of this and I get sick of it. He really does remind me of Deebo Samuel. Deebo Samuel is a very popular comp to a lot of people because of the running back / wide receiver abilities. And I get tired of it because it was thrown out so many different times that so many different dudes who were not very good that, like, it gets tiresome of hearing it. But I'm going to say Corley has that ability. It's that weird low center of gravity type running, you know, to where it's like, they look like they're running on skates. You know, they look like they're skating rather than actually running on a football field.
Yeah.
It's just so fucking smooth. And like his ability to literally stiff arm people into the ground is crazy. I think he's going to test out well. He's 5'11", 200 pounds. You're not worried about size. He's got speed for days. I was really in on Tank Dell last year, and he ended up being exactly what I thought he was going to be. I think Corley's going to be another one of those guys who probably goes on day 2, who year 1 is going to be a big time item for a team that takes him.
Yeah. Gatto, any thoughts?
I mean, Steve Smith delivers, right? Like, if there's somebody that knows wide receivers, it's him. And Q, I think he did a great job of covering both of these highlights from his big board. One other person I'd like to just mention in there is another Xavier Worthy, who has been drawn a comparison with Tank Dell. So that's another name I think we should be looking for in this upcoming draft and seeing where he lands, because could you imagine if he ends up on like Houston?
What's so funny about Worthy too is that Worthy's not even the most talked about guy on Texas. It's Adonai Mitchell, and the fact that, like, I think Worthy might be actually better than him too.
Yeah, that's the guy from Texas, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think he actually might be even better than Mitchell is, which is so funny because, like, so many people are just talking about Mitchell, you know, from Texas.
I do like Ad Mitchell too, though. Just the way he kind of plays, and I think he'll be an excellent addition on a lot of teams. So I think maybe there's a little bit of a versatility that might be why he gets the nod first. But again, I think, you know, both guys are going to be solid picks, right? You're not going to be disappointed if you take either of them.
No, for sure. There's so many. It's so weird about this year because there's so many of these guys that are like 2 wide receivers from the same school who are both like really big prospects, because you, like, with LSU, they have Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. Texas, you have Worthy and Mitchell. Like, it just seems like there's a lot of like two school guys that are just
Washington
coming out.
has another guy that could be a
Yeah.
borderline first rounder too.
Yeah, you got a Dunze, and the other name is escaping me.
I'm gonna look it up. I just saw it.
I was actually gonna like watch a lot of his stuff because Steve Smith actually said that he likes him better than a Dunze, which is so funny.
Jalen Polk.
Polk, that's the one. I knew it was some name like that. Polk, yeah, Polk is. He actually said he likes Polk a little bit better than a Dunze, which is kind of crazy. To me, a Dunze, man, like I don't know, man. His floor is so high to me. Like, I think that Neighbors has a chance of busting, but it's all going to be about where he ends up going because he is so talented. But like, it seems like a lot of his stuff is really based on speed, to where a Dunze is just like the route running is just insane. He reminds me of Hopkins. Very much reminds me of DeAndre Hopkins.
Big body guy.
Just, oh man, he is just like I just think that he fits any NFL scheme. It doesn't matter where he goes, he's gonna be a star.
Yeah,
but there's a lot of guys that I like at wide receiver. Like, I mean, you talk about Troy Franklin, you talk about McConkey from Georgia.
Keon
just so
Coleman
many-
is a big one on my list too.
Yeah, I gotta stop you with
You don't like him?
disagree.
You guys
No.
don't like him
I don't like
No.
him,
Really?
man. No,
The
Because-
reason
is it
why-
because of his lateral abilities. He's just
No,
he's
the-
only
the
running
reason
straight
why-
body people.
Yeah, here's the thing: is that he reminds me of Kelvin Benjamin in all of the worst ways.
yeah,
Another Florida State guy who's big and like did not put up like super impressive numbers while he was there, but everyone said, "Wow, man, the talent is there. He'll definitely grow and develop." And then he ended up just like being a run of the mill, like 800 yards a year kind of guy, but he was 6'5".
Keon Coleman is the most Baltimore Ravens receiver I've ever seen in my life. Like, a guy who cannot fucking separate for shit. He's a 50-50 guy and literally is just getting like can't run past anybody. No, I'm not interested in Keon Coleman at all.
I mean, they were talking about him as like a top 10 talent during the college football season. I'm like, these
Nope.
guys got like 700 yards
Nope.
for this season, and there's nothing dominant about him. Like, what are we doing here? There was a name that I am interested in, and it's a little bit further down in the draft. It's probably like a late day 2, day 3
Can
guy.
I? Is it a wide receiver?
Yeah,
Can I guess?
sure.
Did he play at Michigan?
No,
Ah, okay. Go ahead.
Ricky Pearsall.
Ooh, okay.
So I like him because that guy just makes big time catches in big time moments. And
Yeah.
the numbers not really there in terms of like dominance, but I think he could be a guy that can find a place on a NFL roster and be a pretty good contributor. Like, definitely going to be definitely a slot guy, somebody who's going to use his speed and versatility to make plays.
Yeah.
But
Zone
that guy can
coverage
catch.
killer.
yeah,
He's a
he
zone
can
coverage
catch.
killer. Yeah.
He can.
I like him a lot.
He's just generally like a smarter player too. And he's got speed, but he doesn't have size necessarily. And he's not as talented as some of the other guys that we were talking about. Certainly not some of the other guys that we were talking about. But I mean, you need ballers like that on teams.
I think you can say the same thing about Roman Wilson. That's why I thought you were talking about from Michigan. He's a freak athlete, and like, for McCarthy, like giving McCarthy credit, he was able to throw him open, and like, because there was like a lot, like, again, Michigan's offense, I think people really don't understand how slow that fucking offense is. It is
It's retirement home level.
it
offense.
is so fucking slow. It does not provide you abilities to be like really like express yourself athletically, and Roman Wilson was still able to do that.
Mhm.
He is a really interesting dude. He's going to be, again, I don't like to use too many comparisons just because like I feel like it's kind of lazy. But like, I think it does help though for people who are like trying to, get an idea of like, what can I expect from this type of guy? Tyler Lockett-ish.
Mhm.
Like, if you're thinking about a receiver, like, he reminds me kind of like of Tyler Lockett. So like, just really steady. He's going to be a quarterback's best friend at the next level. And he's going to go on day 2, maybe day 3. So
Yeah, I'm looking at this Sports Illustrated mock draft, and they have him within the top 100 players picked.
makes sense.
So,
Yeah, I think probably on the borderline of day 2, day 3 makes sense.
yeah, but again, like these are guys that we're talking about, 2 guys that did not necessarily play in the most high octane offenses in college football, but still found ways to impress people. And I was just looking that Roman Wilson ran a 4.37 in 2019.
He's going to kill the combine.
Yeah, he's got a little speed on him.
He's stronger than people give him credit for. He's faster than people think he is. And I think, again, because of the fact that he played in that offense, it did not highlight his abilities. He's going to be a guy who goes up on the next level, and he's going to be way better than people expect him to be. There's a lot. I mean, again, like that's like wide receiver 12 or 13, like this is like how deep this is. And then there's the guys like Luke McCaffrey, just because of the name brand to it, like it's gonna interest some people. It's just such a Javon Baker from UCF. I love. There's just so many guys that I'm looking at, and I'm like, these look like potential at worst wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3s that like you're gonna be able to get, and that's like the tough part. Like I don't know how you feel about this, Gatto, but like, if we don't get a quarterback at 6, if the Giants don't get a quarterback at 6, like they're most likely going to take Neighbors or Dunze, which is great. But like at the same time, it's like, man, like this is such a deep class that it feels like taking a receiver at 6. It's just like, I don't know, but
there almost seems like a part of me that's like, well, maybe this is the year we do go an offensive lineman if we can't get our hands on a quarterback. There's that too.
This is the year to take. This is a year to take an offensive lineman too, because there are so many guys. That's another one of the strong suits. This is why I like this draft a lot, because last year it was running backs and tight ends that were probably the deepest, and like who gives a shit about that? We want quarterbacks, we want skill position players, we want offensive linemen. Like that's what we want. So like it's really, really interesting. Tom, do you have like a favorite offensive lineman that you've looked at so far?
I mean, I really liked the guy from Penn State, Olu Fashanu.
Yeah.
There's something about Penn State that gives me a sense of comfort when it comes to like guys with their hands in the dirt. You know what I mean? Like
It's
offensive
so
linemen, defensive linemen. Like if they come from Penn State, I'm like, all right, yeah, I'm not like torn up about that, but
I'm that way with Iowa and Wisconsin.
Yeah, I mean, with those teams, you kind of have to be.
It's like you could tell me he's 5'10" and he's 200 pounds playing tackle, and I'm like, no, thank you. Well, he played at Iowa.
Oh, all right, yeah.
Oh man, maybe I don't know. Maybe they get shot. Like I have tape on him. Like I want to see it. Like
he's gonna make me act up.
And then you watch him, and he's just mauling 300-pound dudes, and it's like, what the? How do they do it?
Yeah, I think
Notre Dame too. Also, Notre Dame.
Yeah, and I was looking at Joe Alt too, and I think I just need to get past my anti-Notre Dame stance on everything.
I'm not into Joe Alt.
You don't like him?
No. You know why?
Interesting.
He reminds me of somebody. When I was watching a lot of his stuff, I was like, oh, you remind me of somebody. You know who I'm going to say.
I'm trying to think of like bad Giants tackles. Eric Flowers.
No, not that bad.
That's the first thing that comes to mind.
Relax, guys. No, he reminds me of Evan Neal.
Ooh,
no.
Very top heavy.
Okay.
Very top heavy. Plays like he's more technical though, and that's the one thing that I think he's going to be good. He is a technician, but there are many times where I see him getting kind of like flat-footed and like kind of leaning, and like you can't do that at the next level. And also I think his height, he's really like his 6'8" frame is going to like work against him in some ways too. Mm-hmm. Like there's sometimes there's like too tall for offensive tackles. I think I like Fashanu a little bit better. I just think he's more I think he's just more steady than a guy like Joe Alt, but I understand why people are coveting Alt more. But I also think I can't pronounce his name. He's a Oregon State kid.
Telly Swaga.
Fuaga, yeah. He
Yeah.
is fucking nasty.
Mhm.
Like, that is a guy that I'm like looking at and I'm like, man, you put him, even if you move him to guard, which I don't think you have to, he is a fucking mauler.
He's slightly smaller, but yeah, I would say I would take him. I would take him or J.C. Latham or
I like
Amarius
Latham.
Mims. I think
Yeah.
over Joe Holt in certain
I
situations.
would say if we're having to choose, I'm gonna go with Mims from Georgia.
Yeah.
There's something
He's
about
very athletic.
yeah,
There's
well, and there's something
limited,
about those guys too. I'm
yeah.
like, I feel
Yeah.
good having a guy from Georgia on this team.
That's why, like, I wasn't the biggest Andrew Thomas fan coming out. I'll admit it. Like, I was wrong about him, but like, there was a certain comfort of like, oh, he's from Georgia. Like, okay,
Mhm.
like there's a feeling. But the knock on, I think the thing with Mims is that's interesting is because more likely the only really knock on him is that there's just not a lot of tape on him. Like, he didn't play that much. But like when you do watch him, you're like, man, a guy that size should not be able to move that way. Like,
Yeah.
it
Mhm.
is freakish the way he moves. So, but I think like,
He's
go ahead. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah. I was gonna say, like, as looking for ways to improve the Giants for 2024,
Yeah.
Mims makes a compelling case if we're sticking with Jones, right? Because he might be able to
Don't
save.
say that, Gatto. Don't say that. Why you gotta ruin it?
You have to prepare for the worst, my friend. You have to prepare for the worst, right? But he would be paired with anybody that you're a little worried about. Your quarterback or the register time that he needs. Any quarterback that's sticking around. I think he would be a great asset in those situations because of his athleticism. He can defend fairly better than most.
There's a guy that I don't even want to say this out loud because I feel like I'm gonna manifest it. I've been keeping an eye on this kid, Jackson Power Johnson. He's really like one of the
From
only true.
Oregon.
Yeah, he's one of the only true centers in the draft. And I just know he's gonna fucking be an Eagle. I just know he's gonna be a fucking Eagle. Their Eagle's gonna take him in the first round as a Kelsey replacement, and he's gonna be a fucking 15-year fucking thorn
I
in
think
my
I've already
side.
heard that.
Yeah,
I've already heard that.
4-time All-Pro.
I was watching him and I'm like, he's gonna be a fucking Eagle. I know he's gonna be an Eagle, and he's gonna fucking torture me for the next 10 years. Like, I already see it fucking happening. But if you're looking for a guy though that like is really like I think underrated and not really getting the credit I think he deserves is Troy Fattanu from Washington.
Yeah.
I think they're gonna
He's a little
move him
small,
inside.
right?
What was that?
He's
Yeah,
a little
I think.
small. Right?
I
I
guess
think he's like
in
300.
he's like 6'4",
Oh, he's not
315.
that small. I'm looking
I
at
think
him.
he could survive a tackle
Yeah.
in the league, and I think he should be a tackle. But I think some teams have kind of toyed with the idea of him moving him to center because he's so athletic and he's so powerful that like it's just a nice mix. I think he's going to be a guy that is going to be like, I don't know if you'll get this reference, Tom, but Gatto will, David Dealish.
Yeah.
In that he can play all five. Like, you can literally like move him anywhere, and I think he could play any position. So the versatility alone for a guy like that, I want to see where he measures out. I want to see where his numbers are. But the like, I saw him chop block a dude into the next fucking century, and it was just filthy. He was like a projectile missile. Like guys that like, I don't care how like he's 6'4". You shouldn't be able to move like that at 6'4". Like, you shouldn't be able to do what he's doing. So there's just a lot of really intriguing dudes, man.
I think there's a lot of some of the energy around Washington has cooled just from that national championship game. So people are like, are these guys that good? I'm like, yeah, they're that good. Like, they're pretty solid players. And I think they all have the talent to be long-term players in the NFL. I
agree. There's another guy that I really love, and he's not going to fit everybody. But like, if you run like a zone block type of scheme, like a power gap type of scheme, Cooper Beebe from Kansas State, that dude is just a murderer. Like dude, like vice grip hands, mauler. And like he's not the fastest footed dude. So like, pass protection may not be his strong suit. If he's a 49er, like that is scary. Like
Yeah.
him on the 49ers offensive line, him on a Ravens offensive line, like scares me because like he's just reminds me again, if we're gonna play comparisons, Kevin Zeitler ish, like he's gonna be a guy who probably plays 13, 14 years at a high level. He's a fun watch. If you want to watch like a really fun offensive line tape, watch Cooper Bebe. He's very interesting.
Yeah. So I think this is just a good draft in general. And
Yep.
I think it's definitely going to be exciting to see how some of these guys play out. I mean, we haven't even gotten into any of the edge rushers that are living in the first round or the cornerbacks and secondary guys. There are some absolute elite level players. And I'm wondering too, like, I think my interest this year is there's a lot of guys who have moved around teams and they've gone through the transfer portal a couple of times or at least once. And we're starting to phase out some of the COVID year guys with, 5+ years of service time in college football. Do any of you have any concerns about drafting those older players as the trade-off? Like they have more experience. Like what are you more concerned about? Would you want guys with more experience, or are you concerned about like the amount of miles that they have on their knees and their legs and their back?
I do think like the fact that these guys stuck around a little bit longer has really been detrimental to them, but I don't know if that necessarily correlates to how they'll actually perform upon entering the NFL, because like not every player has, the same kind of career lifespan in the NFL, right? And some are more adept. I don't know how much we can say, yeah, they put on an extra, 15,000 miles onto their bodies, and therefore, we should instantly write them off, because what you might get still from someone who has that experience is someone who's a little bit easier to train, and you might get a better product early on versus a longer lasting product later, right? So
Yeah.
there's things like that should be considered, and I feel like a lot of them are actually seeing that this has become a detriment, making those decisions and sticking around longer, because I think they've fallen in the general draft conversation. That doesn't mean they will come draft day. In fact, I feel like this added a whole different dimension into how the draft is gonna go down, right? So, what's your takes?
I've been called an ageist before because I don't.
But not for these reasons.
Yeah. So I don't like
You love
taking
old
guys.
people.
Yeah, no, I don't. I honestly don't. I actually don't like taking guys that are like 24 and above because I look at it from a pure numbers perspective, is that like the chances of those guys hitting are very, very small. But again, context is important, right? Because there's usually a reason why they're 24 entering the NFL, right? It's either because they weren't good enough, right? Like Kenny Pickett, right? Why was he 24 entering the league? You look at the last few years of his performance, he wasn't very good. He had a 1-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. Or you've had a lot of injuries, right? But I do think that you have to also keep in mind that there are some guys that are not old but have a lot of wear and tear. Like Braylon Allen is a good example of this. He played at Wisconsin, running back, right? Running back, you want to always look at their career amount of attempts, right? Because like he's had almost 600 rushing attempts in 3 years. So he's only
Where did you go to
20.
school again? Wisconsin?
Yeah.
That tracks. All of those Wisconsin guys have like a
Always.
zillion carries by the time.
They
Like
run them
Monty
into the
Ball
ground.
was Ball was dead by the time that he came into the league.
That's why I'm surprised Jonathan Taylor is like still going.
That's true, yeah.
Because like it's like he was run into the ground. He had almost like 1,000 career carries before he even got in the NFL. But like he's only 20 years old, but like he's already had over 600 career carries. So it's like they got to keep that in mind. But like for me, it's only because like typically those guys are usually either injury prone, have had a lot of injuries, or they're just like you look at their years and you're like, yeah, it wasn't really good until his last year. So that's always what worries me. When you're like 2021, there's a reason, right? You're out in the draft because of the fact that you've had a good season. You've had 2 or 3 years consistently, and it played really well. So I'm not ever gonna write somebody off, but like it certainly will catch my eye if they're a little bit older. But this is a really
About
interesting draft.
I just yeah, I feel like we're looking at this year is just there's so much opportunity. I think it is a big part of it too becomes that there's a lot more guys now being forced kind of to go out and draft too, right? They've reached the maximum that they can be in college. So we have people offloading or players offloading into this draft. And there it could ultimately mean that there's going to be a lot of guys that fall so far under the radar but end up big on a team as an undrafted as undrafted talent. So it's I kind of look forward to getting
Yeah.
surprised somewhere later down the line. Unfortunately, it's probably going to be those bad surprises where it ends up being like again the Eagles finding some gem later on.
I really
But
do love that though, is that like there are always these like that's always gonna happen in a very deep draft is like typically you'll find guys that probably would have been drafted any other year that don't get drafted. And so you do find a lot of good gems there.
mhm.
But yeah, I think the I think the reality here is that like you really like want to find like if for us as Giants fans, right? It's all about finding the value because again, like I said, this is a really deep wide receiver class. It's a really deep offensive lineman class. So you don't want to like overdraft at certain positions, especially if it's like a need position. But
Mhm.
like I think what people also need to realize is that like in these type of drafts, usually there's like a run that starts, and like if you don't catch the run,
Mhm.
you're gonna be left out in the cold.
Yeah, yes. I mean, we saw that was it last year with or no, 2 years ago we
Tight
saw that with
ends.
wide tight ends, wide receivers the year before that.
We saw it with
Um
running back and tight end last year. They like when they
mhm,
started to go, they went and they were
the
gone.
board cleared out quick.
Yeah,
And
it
and
goes really
it's because
fast.
of teams have to assess this by the urgency in which they need to fill vacated spots,
100%.
right? And
Yeah.
and so you can't be left in the cold when you have sincere doubts about a position on your team or your roster.
Well, I said it with
So
the offensive linemen in this group. I think like you're going to see some guys going round one. I think you could see 5 or 6 guys going round one, but then round two, like mid round two, you're going to see these guys start to fly off the board, and then
mhm,
like you're again like there's depth, but like there's a limit, right? Because also those lower end guys that you expect to maybe go in round five might go in round three. So like
mhm.
it's that always that like internal struggle of like not wanting to overdraft a guy, but like at the same time, like if you don't take him, like there's nothing left. So
Yeah, for sure. And so like I know we're coming up on an hour here. But I do want to just briefly go in. Guys, is there because we've talked about offense quite a bit here and offensive positions, are there some defensive players that are really catching your eyes? We don't have to go position by position in these comparisons, just a quick, you know, who is it you're really interested in? Who are you really liking in this upcoming draft? Tom,
sorry,
you're
'cause
muted. You're still muted, Tom.
I had this pulled up and then I lost it. So,
Oh.
you know, I like to pay attention to the guys on the defensive line because I feel like being able to find like really quality players can be hard. I really like Byron Murphy from Texas. I don't there's something about how that defense played this year, that it was different than the Texas teams of the past, where like in the mid 2000s, like that Vince Young era and before, their defense was just loaded with dudes. And they kind of went away from that for a long time. And the team stunk for a long time too. But he is one that I just, given like his strength in the position that he plays, I think he can do a lot of like, there's this guy, he plays, he plays for the Eagles. I can't remember his name. Been in the league for about a zillion years. Fletcher.
Fletcher Cox.
Fletcher Cox, yeah.
He reminds me a lot of him.
Yeah. Murphy, again, like everyone's gonna make the Aaron Donald comparisons, right? Because like any guy that's like 6'1", 300 pounds, he is a disruptor. For again, like don't worry about his size. Like it's one of those guys again. Like last year, Tampa Bay Bucks took that defensive lineman. His name's gonna escape me. Hold on. It was the kid from Pitt. It literally like Aaron Donald,
like the Aaron Donald 2.0 kid.
Elijah Cansey. And like everyone was like, "Oh, he's too small," and I'm like, "Do we not learn our lesson here? Like, do we not like? You have to trust the tape." And again, you're seeing a guy who was like a one gapper. Like he's not going to be Dexter Lawrence. He's not going to like be able to take on triple teams and everything like that. But if you put him in a position where he ultimately can like just kind of one gap and attack, he will do what you need him to do. And Cansey, who, he had 4 sacks this in rookie season, not bad for a rookie defensive tackle, but also when you take into account that he was a terror in the playoffs. So he looked really good. For me, oh, man, this is a tough one because I hated his dad growing up.
I think I know who you're talking about.
I think you know who I'm talking about too. Jeremiah Trotter Jr.
Yeah,
he is just nasty, and played for Clemson. He's going to test out really well. I think he'll test out better than his dad did. 4-star recruit coming out. He is just he's got that dog in him, and like for like linebacker nowadays, like I know off-ball linebacker has been kind of like a hot button, like when the Lions took that linebacker in the first round this past year. I understand that it's a position that like a lot of people don't feel like you need to invest the first round talent in. And I don't think Trotter is necessarily going to be a first round talent, but he like, if you do get a good one, there like it really is worth its weight in gold. He has an ability to not only play coverage, but also to be able to attack the middle of the defense. Like he's going to be like, sometimes I don't really like the Nepo kids in the NFL, but like he's gonna be a good one. I think also he might be like a round 2, round 3 guy.
Can I say though that particularly with the position that Jeremiah Trotter Jr. is going to play in the NFL, and you said too, like there's been a de-emphasizing on the linebacker position of the last like 5-6 years or so.
Yeah.
You don't realize you need one until you absolutely don't have one.
I know.
And every like during the dark times of the NFL season when it was all hope was lost in Washington, every person that I follow on Twitter would be posting like, this is my projected mock draft. And it would be like Drake May, Caleb Williams, and then like second pick is Jeremiah Trotter Jr.
Yep.
Like I think people are high on him because of his pedigree, but also where he played too. He was a staple at Clemson, and I think he might be an end of the first round guy because people trust the product with him.
For sure. I also think another guy that I've been kind of keeping an eye on that he actually doesn't get as much buzz as his teammate, maybe because his teammate has a fucking awesome name. Is Terrion Arnold from Alabama, the corner. Kool-Aid McKinstry obviously gets a lot of the buzz, but like he's got real potential lockdown. Like I think he's going to be a guy. I wouldn't be shocked if after the combine is over and people start actually really digging into the tape. It wouldn't be surprising if Arnold ends up in the top 10.
Yeah.
And like also only being 20 years old, he's got really impressive skills, and like he's very technical. His man coverage abilities. Again, I love Alabama players just in general, but like he's really, really interesting.
Can I get your guys' opinion on Cooper DeJean from Iowa? Like,
we got one, guys.
Yeah, we got one. We have a player.
we got one, guys.
For everything that Iowa is not, defense is what it is. And I am really intrigued by him. I'm on a website where they have him rated as the #1 DB prospect in the draft. Behind him is Nate Wiggins, not too far away. Kool-Aid after that, Terrion Arnold right after that. But are we okay with a cornerback having projected 4.5 speed in the NFL today? I don't know if this guy is going to stick around too long at cornerback.
I don't think he's a 4.5 guy.
Really?
I don't think so. It's sad because he's not going to be able to perform at the combine because he's still recovering from an injury. I think he'd test out way better than a 4.5.
Yeah.
But to say that, yes, I think it depends on what type of scheme you run. If you're a primary zone team, I think you can survive. Like Richard Sherman survived in that like zone type defense, and he was a 4.6 guy. He wasn't like a 4.5 guy. So I just think that it's about where, but like I've only watched a little bit of him, and he's really, really tough kid. And it wouldn't shock me if he's even with the injury and not going to test out that much. It wouldn't shock me if he's like a mid-first round pick. Just because
I get a lot of Christian Gonzalez vibes from him.
It's a good, again, zone corner type. Yeah, I think that's a very apt comparison.
Yeah, Gatto. Anybody that you're looking at?
I really like Chris Jenkins out of
another Nepo kid.
Yep. I know.
Yeah,
I'm obviously joking because Chris Jenkins is a stud. I don't care who his dad is. He's a stud.
But he's just, and he's a physical freak. I mean, he has the size. I mean, he needs. I think has a little bit of issue as a pass rusher. But as a run stopper, I think he's going to make a great addition for a team like the Bills, who really are down in that position, and they're going to need some help there. It just all around, I think he's tremendous. Obviously, he's got the pedigree, so we kind of know that the product he's going to put out is probably going to be pretty good. So I look forward to seeing where he lands and what he ends up doing. Hopefully he doesn't.
Yeah, but his dad was not a big pass rusher, though. Like, I mean, I'm okay. I might be anti-modern NFL, but I'm okay with a guy who's 6'3", 305, just clogging everything up in the middle and making everyone's life harder.
I think we saw this year the establishment of the run is a huge point for teams to pivot and be successful, and having a guy like this that can really stop that, right? Like, look at what Jadeveon Clowney did this year, and how important that really is to scheming.
Yeah, I think as more teams start to adapt, with the style of like passing offenses currently, like we saw a little bit of it this past offseason where teams are starting to run those like multiple looks depending on which side of the field that they were on. If a team is smart and wants to be like proactive in finding a guy who's going to be able to clog up the middle, because the alternative of passing obviously is running. And there might be a resurgence of running backs again in the NFL. What better way to solve that problem than to find a giant human being and stick him in between, standing over the center and the guard, and say, just look busy over there. Just like make things more complicated there.
I think people overthink it sometimes too, in that when it comes to a guy like Chris Jenkins, you're not drafting him expecting him to be a like stud pass rusher. Like he's really elite at reading blocks.
Mhm.
So it's more of like in that run defense, like not being fooled, but and like keep maintaining gap integrity, obviously, but also understanding like how to move in a way that like doesn't allow an offensive lineman to get ahead of you. And like so, like if you need a run stopper, like who has potential upside for pass rush abilities, like that's your guy. Like that's why like he's probably not going to go in the first round. Like maybe depend. It really depends on if people can project him to be better at that. But like you're not he's gonna be one of those guys that you're just happy you have, right? Like I think like the Kansas City Chiefs, it wouldn't like for a team that really struggled to stop the run, wouldn't shock me if pick number 32, they end up taking a guy like Chris Jenkins because it's just again, it's about four, right? Because like
Yeah.
he's going to be at worst, he's going to be an elite level. And I think now we're seeing more shifting to running again, like run games have become more prevalent. You're gonna see more guys get drafted higher than this. Like I'm not usually of the mind to ever draft a guy who's a run stuffer only, but they do serve a purpose.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, there's a couple other guys in there too that were pretty high on everybody's lists at the beginning of the year, like Jared Verse and Chop Robinson from Jared Verse from Florida State, Chop from Penn State. And
Jared
those
Verse,
guys,
man. I love
yeah,
Jared Verse.
I haven't heard a ton of buzz around those guys, and some of the mock drafts that I looked at have them further back, later in the first round, or there's maybe like one that I saw Verse going like 12 or 13. But I'm wondering if we're getting a lot of like, we need to get the quality offensive linemen off the board first, and then these defensive players are probably going to go.
Well, I mean, you may not even see like there's been like talk about whether or not we're going to see a defensive player in the top 10. And I think we will, but like I think
It'll be a
there's
DB though, right?
it could be Arnold, but I think it could be the edge rusher from Bama, Dallas Turner,
Yeah.
or Latu Latu. Now the one thing with Latu Latu that worries me obviously is that like at one point he was medically retired, right? He suffered a lot of concussions. But he got cleared. He went to UCLA, ended up putting out a really good season. So if you're comfortable with the medical projections, I think he's number one.
Mhm.
But like there's gonna be enough people who are scared off by that. And then you got Dallas Turner, obviously Bama edge rushers, Anderson came out last year, was really good. They project well in the NFL. So and then Verse, I don't want to compare Verse to Brian Burns just because Florida State guy to Florida State guy, but
Right.
like there are certain similarities. I think the defense, like, and Chop Robinson, I like Chop Robinson. Just like very inconsistent. And I just don't know what to do. Like, because like I think he's gonna run really, I think he's gonna test out really well. He's 6'3, 250, he's built really well. I think he's going to run a good 40. I think he's going to hit a good 3 cone. And like all those things are going to match up. But like sometimes it worries me when a guy like that. So I don't know. Like he's also a little stiff. Not a ton of like pass rush moves that I saw. Like he just worries me a little bit. But like if he gets into day 2, I think it's where it makes him more interesting. But I don't know. I don't know what to do with a guy like that.
It'll certainly be interesting to see like where those guys land, because at the end of the day, we've said this a couple of different times, like it's not necessarily where you're drafted, but by who you're drafted by.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was just looking at some of the numbers for Chop Robinson, and it just didn't like, for all the buzz you got, man, like there wasn't a whole lot of action there. And I think he was banged up a little bit by the end of the year too. But Penn State also kind of underperformed pretty significantly this year. So it'll be interesting to see where these guys go. I think I'm going to just say this one. I had mentioned Byron Murphy. I think he would be fantastic as a Houston Texan.
Ooh, yeah.
Hmm.
I like that.
Yeah.
He also
I like that.
feels like that fit, right? And they do
Yeah.
a good job of drafting.
Will
some
Anderson,
players.
mix him with Will Anderson there. Yeah.
Mhm.
There's a guy that this might be my number one guy that I'm interested to watch at the combine because I don't know what to do with him yet. But there is certainly something that's really intriguing about him, and it's Darius Robinson. He is a pass rushing edge from Missouri.
Mhm.
6'5", 286, almost 11-inch hands, 35-inch arms. And he's big. And what's interesting is I'm want to see what he weighs in at. Does he go heavier and be more of like a 5 tech, or does he go lighter and try and be more of an edge? And then I think I want to see him test because he is going to be, I think, like a guy who tests out really, really well. I watched some tape of this guy, man, and like he plays with a violent edge. And I like guys like that. Like to me, he reminds me of coming out? Muhammad Wilkerson. Do you remember Muhammad Wilkerson?
Ooh, yeah.
Kind of that big edge type guy who can like maybe once in a while kind of stand up and then put his hand in the dirt. There's a certain level of violence to his game that I just really, really like. Very technician, like he is a technician, and he finds the ball really, really well. So like there, and look, he's probably going to be a day 2 guy. He's not super fast. He can sometimes plays a little out of control from what I've seen, but like, man, he's intriguing. Like I just want to see where he goes though. I want to see what he does with himself first.
I don't mind having a guy on my team with a wingspan of 84 inches.
Dude, he is. It
That
shows
is a
up,
bird.
too.
That is a bird.
But dude, there are some guys
Yeah.
who are big and like it just doesn't. You don't see it on film. Like you look at them and you're like, how is this dude 6'5", 270 pounds with 37-inch arms? Because he just doesn't look very big. He doesn't look very short. Like you see it. Like you watch his stuff and you're like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Like I see that guy. And he's probably gonna go in round 2, round 3. Also, if you want a more modern comp for Darius Robinson, I think he's on the Eagles. Josh Sweat, I think, is a good
that's a good one.
of that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Very nice. Yeah. So all our listeners, remember that tomorrow is the NFL Combine. Be going on all next week. Guys, any lasting notes here before we head out?
Nothing at the moment.
As
I'm
Hughes' lung
curious
explodes on him.
I'm curious to see what kind of buzz comes from the combine, because we talked about this the other day. It's people doing football things in underwear. But
Underwear Olympics.
who is going to be hindered by a one-off thing that happens at the combine? And also, what crazy ass stories are we going to get from like NFL scouts and executives asking these guys really upsetting and bothersome, problematic questions? But that's always funny to see. Like, what are they going to say next?
Yeah, I mean, there's not.
And we'll do our best to get a best of the best for next week's episode. In that,
Yeah, there's not a ton that I need to see. There's some guys that I want to see where they weigh in and everything, but like everything other than that, I think I already have kind of a general sense of how I feel about certain guys. I don't think anything's going to change at the combine.
For sure, I'd agree with that.
I always do like to find like somebody had a lot more speed than anyone had anticipated, or really have some flashes like that. So there are some treasures that do pop up. A lot of
seeing the
we're
40
just
times
confirming what we already know.
Seeing the 40 times is always fun.
And that's what it is, honestly. It is just either confirmation of what you already felt like, or like, maybe I need to go back for a second because like maybe it's not what I thought it was. So
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
nice, guys.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. What do you say, Gata? You want to leave it there?
I think so. Yes, indeed. Well, if you like this episode, there will be more of them coming in the upcoming weeks. Thank you for listening to the Play Breakers podcast.
Be hard to
Sorry,
break that one.
My Rob Lowe energy really took over there.
Go NFL.
Yeah, go NFL. Catch us here next
Fair
week,
play.
and we'll be giving you some reactions as well as some other takes for the off season. So thank you all, and keep listening. Also, like and do all that other shit that helps promote us if you enjoy this podcast. Tom, you are way better at this, and
Crushing it.
You're doing great, sweetie.
Bye.
But yeah, until next week.
Later, y'all.